I think one of the biggest ones was realizing at a deeper level how and what it meant to do life with God and not for God. I really wanted to perform. I really wanted to see people come to the Lord. How much could I do? How much gumption? How much weight did I carry? And I think once you kind of lose everything and you don't even know what direction up it, you can just give it to God and say, God, I know you're the only thing I have. And at that point, it's a partnership. It's no longer here, I can do this for you, or I'm going to read my Bible as a task, or I'm going to say this prayer in a certain way. It is so much more, for lack of a better word, organic, and where you can be spirit led, where you can trust God.
So, welcome to the Follow Forward podcast. This is about real stories, global voices, and Christ centered servant leadership. Today, I'm joined by my good friend, Jake Tirabassi, all the way from California. Hi, Jake. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tim. Awesome to be here with you today.
As I was preparing for our conversation, I was thinking how long we've known each other, and trying to work out. I think it goes back to ambassadors in sport years, and you went to Spain. Am I right? Was that your first encounter?
Yeah, I was around 2005. I had graduated school. I thought I had my dream job as a PE teacher, and 2 years in, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so hard. And so I said, I got to find a ministry. I found ambassadors. They had an opportunity to go do an internship in Granada, Spain. And funny enough, I didn't play soccer and I didn't speak Spanish. And they said, we'll take you. We have no one else.
So, yeah, desperate times calls for desperate measures. I was going to ask you about the soccer link, because California. I mean, this is going back 20 odd years. Soccer was predominantly a female sport back then. So, did you grow up playing soccer? Or was it just your passion for sport that was really the key thing?
It really was. I grew up a little bit undersized, let's say, from an athletic perspective. And so I did a lot of individual sports, snowboarding, wakeboarding. And after college, when I was a PE teacher, I just picked up a little bit of everything. And then when I got the opportunity to move to Spain to play futsal in the prisons and at the university, boy, did I fall in love with it. And it was like prime Galacticos in Madrid and Ronaldinho in Barcelona. You couldn't help but just fall in love with the sport.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I guess that put you, I mean, we're going to delve into your story a little bit, but, we share a love for Africa. You've been on the continent. In fact, I think you were in Cape Town fairly recently doing a flying in visit. I see you're wearing your Springboks jersey. If my memory serves me well, you were actually going to a Springbok game, and you coming backwards and forwards to Africa as often as you can, don't you?
Yeah, we try to come at least once a year, every 18 months. We have such close friends in Cape Town. When we lived in Uganda for 5.5 years, we realized that we needed a place to kind of have respite and recovery. And the church on Main that we went to in Cape Town, and the community, and yourself and your family, and it just became a home away from home. And so we want to make sure that we keep it that way.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I think we're going to talk a bit about the Uganda years, as well, and some of your lessons from ministry. But let's go to the origins story, and Jake, growing up, and maybe give us a bit of a picture of what life was like, and particularly, your story of your relationship with Jesus. When did that emerge as something that would shape your future?
Yeah. Well, my mom has a very powerful testimony of addiction and Christ just changing her life. And when she moved back from California to Ohio, she worked at Youth for Christ doing youth ministry. So I grew up in youth ministry. My dad was a director, and that's what we did. And so I grew up with high school kids. I partly blame that on why I still am a high school kid at 46 years old. But um, I growing up, within the church and doing youth group stuff all my life. Strangely enough, I followed all the rules, but I realized when I was 18 on a missions trip in Mexico It was my turn to get up and share my testimony. And boy, did the Lord kind of convict me. And it was just one of those moments where I said, oh my goodness, the outside of my cup looks awesome. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't have sex, I don't cuss, I'm doing all the things. But who am I? How do I treat people? How do I treat my teachers, my coaches, my friends, the people I sit next to in class? And I just realized, at that point, it was a little bit like, whoa, put me right back in my seat. And I couldn't even share my testimony at that moment. And so it was a wake up call of there is so much more to living a life for Christ than just what we do. It's how we live, how we treat people. And so I had an interesting journey, and I started at a Christian college in San Diego, transferred to the University of Tennessee just to get outside of the bubble of California.
Mm.
And I think that was when I started to have my own faith and my own belief, and it really did become my own. And I went to a conference, and I had a woman come up to me. I think it was truly a divine moment. She said, "I can tell you're struggling." And I said, I'm struggling because I have so much. It's been a gift, like my life, my family, just the opportunities that I've had. But I struggle with poverty. I struggle to explain, why did I get this? I didn't deserve this. And she said, you need to trust God for the answers that He gives you and just hand over the rest to Him. If you don't understand poverty or any of those really difficult things, trust Him with those and trust that He'll give you the answers that you need. And so my journey was one that very similar to a lot of people that grow up in a Christian household, and there was a shift at some point where I realized, wow, I really need to live a life with God and not just for God, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does, absolutely. I mean, I resonate with that. Grew up in a Christian home, and I had a very real relationship with Jesus when I was a child. But there came a point in my teenage years when I realized, there was a cost to following Jesus. And did I want to go the road of my friends who were turning their backs on him and taking, that wide road that the Bible very speaks about that leads to, where it says leads to destruction, or did I want to really take the narrow path, and for me, there were various moments along the path that made me realize actually I do want to be all in. I don't want to be
Hmm.
someone that sits on the fence or goes completely off track. Actually, this life of following Jesus is worth it.
Hmm.
But it doesn't take our problems away, does it? It's not a bridge over troubled waters, but we have
Right.
someone who is with us throughout our journey. So maybe how has that been for you in terms of, as a young adult, finding your way? How did your faith anchor you? And what were some of those formative lessons you had to learn?
Yeah, so it was interesting for me, even as you mentioned that. I think there has been points in my life where at the hardest moment I was the most dependent on the Lord. If I look back at when God really almost said, "You're gonna have to lean on me because you got nothing else," I
Mm,
look back at those as some of my sweetest times in my journey. At that trip in Mexico when I was 18, in my living room in Uganda when it felt like there was no way out. Marriage was hard, ministry was hard, nothing was going the way that you felt like it should be going when you've committed your life to living for the Lord. And yet he drew me in. He draws you in at those moments, and I think I look back at some of those times as those moments when you're like, "Wow, Holy Spirit, you are moving in and through me." And now it's like almost every day, "God, just give me wisdom. Holy Spirit, lead me and help me love people like you would."
mm. Oh, remarkable. That's great. And so let's you mentioned Uganda there, and you've already said it wasn't a bed of roses, your time in Uganda, but maybe just explain, there must have been a context to ending up in Uganda. I've been to now Uganda several times the last couple of years. We've got a message hub there, beautiful country. I've mostly been to Kampala. I know you were in a more rural context. So
Mhm.
just take us through the steps. Firstly, how did you discern God's call to going to Uganda? And then what materialized? How did that work out for you and your wife being on the ground there?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna preface all of this with, I don't even really like to go camping. So moving from the beach in California to northern Uganda on the border of Congo and Sudan is beyond camping naturally. And so my wife I met her. She played soccer at a local university, Vanguard. I was just coaching a local high school, working with kids, and she got asked because she was in nursing school to go on a missions trip to Northern Uganda. And I don't know how much you know of the history of Joseph Kony, of the child soldiers, of the IDP camps, internally displaced people. But it was a ravaged area of that country, and there is a dynamic between the North and the South. With Museveni having been there for a long time, there's just a lot of geopolitics and things. And so she was asked to go on a trip. Even at that point, you had to be back to the hotel before dark. It was still a little bit dicey and sketchy in that area. And she came back, and in particular, she had a heart for Congolese refugees. So the UPDF, the Ugandan military, would go do peacekeeping in Congo, and then they would bring back wives. And those women would often be abandoned and put into really tough situations. And she was just it's tough still, genuinely heartbroken for the plight of those people. And so when she came back, I don't think she'd been out of the country much. She hadn't had a lot of missions experience. Um, she said, I would like to move there. And so we went on our 1 year anniversary. We did like a little mega fest at the university, played soccer, just had a blast. And I said, okay, I could do this for a little bit. And so we made a 10-month commitment. And she was going to go work with that population. I said, I love soccer ministry. I'm going to take a ball. I'm going to walk up to the prison and we'll see what kids go in there. We'll head out to the village and, you drop a ball and 100 kids will just all over it. Um, and so that 10 months turned into about 5.5 years of us being in Northern Uganda. The prison ministry that God opened up for us. If there's time for a quick story,
No, that's
um,
go for it. Let's
it
dive.
was
Particularly good story around prison ministry. Love that.
Yeah, so we go into the prison. I remember my first time going into the prison in Spain, and all the guys were like up at the door, and I'm like, wow, I'm a little like my heart's palpitating, and I go in, and apparently I look like a Spanish comedian, and they thought I was like some famous guy, and I couldn't speak Spanish, I wasn't funny, I couldn't play soccer, so I let them all down. So going into the prison in Uganda, I'm like, okay, I can't do worse than that. And so we walked in. We said, "Can we play a little soccer match with the inmates?" And this is a large prison, and there were a significant number of inmates there. And so they lined the field, 3, 4, 5 guys deep, had the yellow flag going, and we played. Just it was a blast. We had so much fun, and then we brought everybody together, and there was a gentleman named Aloysius who was from Kampala. And when he was 18, 19, his church team won the Kampala tournament. And 3 or 4 of the guys got called up from his church team to the national team. And he was like the third or fourth left back, 18 years old, ends up starting, total stud, obviously, and injures his knee. And he goes, God, if you heal my knee, I will not chase professional sports. I will serve you. And ultimately, God healed his knee. He moved up to Northern Uganda multiple times, made it through rebel areas. They let him go. He was doing sports ministry. And so he came into the prison with us. He shared his testimony. A third of the inmates in that prison gave their life to the Lord right there, and it just started raining. It was like baptism, Holy Spirit moment. Just like, whoa, God, did you just totally use me as a vessel to knock on a door, share this, have Aloysius share his testimony? And it was like, okay, we need to start a ministry here. We need to come in here twice a week and, teach the Bible and build relationship. And, just we were back. You mentioned earlier, we were back in Uganda a couple months ago. We went to the prison. They remembered us. They still have the goals that we built. They're running a league. I mean, it's just so cool how one little God moment turns into 12, 15 years later, just continued opportunity for him, for him, period.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I remember you sharing about the prison ministry, and like so many ministries, it's just being in the right place at the right time and just trying to be obedient, isn't it? And seeing what God does, not necessarily a master plan, but just like you say, I'm gonna show up with some soccer balls and see what happens, that's just life being in God's plan and God's will and in obedience leads to fruitfulness and can lead to surprising fruit, where God,
Yeah.
he takes the foolish things, doesn't he, to shame the wise, and then he really brings things about that give him much glory. But clearly, it wasn't easy being in Uganda. What were some of the lessons that God had for you during those years?
I think one of the biggest ones was what I referred to a little earlier of realizing at a deeper level how and what it meant to do life with God and not for God. I really wanted to perform. I really wanted to see people come to the Lord. How much could I do? How much gumption, how much weight did I carry? And I think once you kind of lose everything and you don't even know what direction up is, you can just give it to God and say, God, I know you're the only thing I have. And at that point, it's a partnership. It's no longer here, I can do this for you, or I'm going to read my Bible as a task, or I'm going to say this prayer in a certain way. It is so much more, for lack of a better word, organic.
Mm,
And it's truly that where you can be spirit led, where you can trust God, where you don't have to perform. There isn't any pride or arrogance or any of that of like, look what I did. It was like, holy mackerel, in spite of who I am, look at
yeah,
what God did.
yeah, yeah.
And so
So,
that one is a big one.
mhm, mhm. So you would say
What were you
that that there was a perspective shift in that sense. And I
huge.
think everyone that enters missions, and this was going to be my next question for you in terms of lessons learned. Is there anything, having spent that time on the mission field cross culturally in a completely different context, in a rural setting, is there anything you wish that someone had said to you before you went there? And what are some of the things that you would advise people who are going to the mission field now, who are engaging in that? What are some of the things that you think should be part of the Mission 101 guidelines?
Mm. So we didn't do mission training, which if like at some level, I would say figure out if you have to do your own preparation, whatever that preparation looks like. And there is a financial, there's emotional, there's relational, all the kind of components of life. I would say have a plan, really have a support team in place. Get a solid prayer team, get a couple people that you can really be so painfully honest and open with that can help carry some of that weight. That would be one of my first recommendations. Um, secondarily, I think whether it's business, whether it's nonprofit, whether it's missions, how important alignment is. And when I say alignment, I think there's like, yeah, we have the alignment in our mission, our vision, our values, and our goals. But I think there's a deeper level of alignment, especially when you're serving the Lord, when you're in the face of spiritual warfare, when you're going into a culture that you might even think you know because you've been there for a couple weeks or you know people from there. There are going to be so many hurdles and challenges that you can't possibly anticipate, whether it's corruption or things that you just don't know until you know. And so to have that support system in place, to have the plan in place, to be willing to pivot from that plan and say, you know what, God, if you've called me here to do this and you change and it's this, I can be okay with that. I don't have to answer to anybody but you. I think that's a big thing because we left people disappointed and we're like, how are we disappointing you? And I think it was from a lack of alignment. Make space for self-care. And like self-care isn't necessarily vegging out on the couch or sleeping in. I think those are components in some cases, but how do you do self-care in a way that you really are processing what you're learning? You are able to work through some of the pain, some of the hurt, some of the baggage that you bring into the situation. And then you're able to figure out how do I navigate these things that I don't know that can put me in tough spots. And I think when you have self-care as something that is a baseline for you, it gives you that margin that I don't think we had when we were there.
Yeah, I mean, I think this temptation of of being all in, but actually then going beyond that, in some ways is testament to, yes, good intentions, responding to the need, but it also we are elevating our own ability to solve problems of other people
Hmm.
as well, which is a big danger in missions,
Yes.
cross-cultural work. Um, and it is difficult. It's difficult to be disciplined enough to say, I can only do what God has called me to do, the things in front of me that He's given me to do, and I've got to trust Him with the things. But often it's very often in that moment of understanding our limitations, that then God can
Hmm.
work to be the most fruitful, isn't it? It's like it's so counterintuitive, and yet that's
Yes.
the proof of the work of the Spirit in your life. I'm wondering, in re-entry back to the States and now involved in more corporate life, um,
Hmm.
what lessons from the mission field have put you then in good stead for life in business and life back in the States, where almost you get this reverse culture shock. How has that sat?
Absolutely. We were beat up. We came back beat up, and it was really hard to adapt. I think in different seasons of coming back to visit, which was part of why eventually we were like going back to the US is so difficult. In South Africa and Cape Town, where we have people that even understand the dynamics different than people in America will understand that, we had that ability to decompress. And I think some of the things for me, one, like commitment, what commitment really looks like and means in a different kind of way. You know, make a marriage commitment. You often make commitments at work or even commitments to yourself, but holding yourself to a commitment and being committed to something, I really believe is critical in just saying I'm going to keep the course. I
Mm,
think the second one is just humility and how critical it is if you really want to have an impact in somebody's life. And let me tell you, where I struggle the most in this is probably in my marriage, but it's in ministry, it's in business, it's in everything. How do you remain humble? Man, I just hit a banger into the upper V, and I'm thinking, just give me the ball. I'm going to go score a next one. And God just trips me right over the ball. And so it's a sports analogy, but how critical humility is, in my opinion, in business, in nonprofit work, in relationships. So that's the second one. I think the third one is respect. From the time I was a PE teacher, what I said was, respect yourself. If you can really genuinely respect yourself and respect the gifts and talents and the things that God created you uniquely to do, it allows you to respect others in a totally different way. And it comes back to, I think, servant leadership. And I don't know if we'll touch on leadership later, but I think that having that commitment, having that humility, truly having respect for God, respect for others, respect for yourself, and then integrity, doing the things that you don't want to do, not doing the things that you do want to do, what you do when nobody is watching. Like, I cannot emphasize how important that is. And I mean, I think it's common sense, but it took me going through the mission field and coming back broken and getting beat up in business to just realize, man, I got to put in the hard work and I got to do the right thing when no one's watching. And
mm,
it's not
mm,
easy.
mm.
I think
Yeah,
another one is a word we don't use a lot is stewardship. How do you be a steward of your relationships, of the resources that God's given you, of the opportunities that you have? And I think people, whether it's, a shepherd being a steward, whether it's a project manager being a steward, whatever that is, if that can be a baseline for somebody of how do I steward what God's given me, holy mackerel, is fruit gonna be produced. And then the last one is just how important trust is. If you lose trust, how important winning that trust back is, how important building a foundation of trust is. Um, I think those are just kind of a few of the things that have really struck me in the last couple years.
yeah. Oh, Jake, yeah, that's fantastic, and it almost sounds like a manifesto. Those are things we need to continue to grapple with. As you say, these things don't come naturally. Often,
Mhm.
these are things that actually have to be submitted to Christ and worked at. I mean, the thing of humility. And when I give teaching or talking on this, I quote actually my wife, who quotes someone else. He said, "How do you grow in humility?" This person said, "Well, you do humble things." And you do the humble things that no one sees, and then you don't talk about it, and then you know between you and God what's happening in your heart and in your life. But
Mm,
that's the secret sauce. There's no rocket science in some of this. It's the same with integrity, isn't it? Let your word and actions be consistent with one another. It sounds so simple, and yet the heart is deceitful above all things. And so for me, you said we're going to talk about leadership. We are talking about leadership, and this is the whole point of this Follow Forward podcast, is that we're only is as effective in leadership in direct proportion to how we're following Christ.
yep.
And when we become people worth following, not so that we can get a following, but that so we can invest in people that they can fulfill their potential in Christ. And that's the
Yes.
continuum we're seeking to get. And that moves us forward. It moves the kingdom forward. It enables, even in our brokenness and in our difficult times, it enables us to still have hope, because we
Yes.
understand that, yeah, Jesus isn't done yet. He isn't done with us yet.
Yes.
We keep getting up. We can keep on going. And it sounds like you've had even some ups and downs. Well, I know also from conversations we've had, there's been some ups and downs. It's not been a bed of roses. I think most of us think about the California life, and I do know you're a surfer, and we have to bring up surfing in this. And maybe there's a whole other talk on lessons between surfing and leadership. We talk about the message trust. We talk about if we catch a wave for Jesus, we want to ride it for His glory for as long as possible, and see the kingdom fruit. So we know there's some wonderful metaphors there, but we think of California, and I think there's a lot of romanticism in the world about what life in California may or may not be like. But where people are, we know there's going to be challenges, and so you've faced some challenges. You've touched on some of the leadership principles that you've been learning, but looking forward now, Jake. What are you sensing God calling you into? What does it mean for you to live a life having had these influences begin to shape your character, begin to shape your approach to life and ministry, even your marriage and workplace environment? What are you trusting for the future?
I love that. That's a great question. When I do my strengths finders, I
Mhm.
get like strategic, futuristic, all these things that are not practical at all. But I think
Head
that
in the clouds, is that
question,
what you mean?
yes, that's what I mean. But that question hits my sweet spot. I think to the bigger umbrella is mentorship and discipleship hand in hand. How are you mentoring? Who are you mentoring? Who are you being mentored by? What does that really look like on a practical level? I think that's a big piece of what I think God's doing in and through me. And in the professional sense, I've created and developed a mentorship program at the last company I was at. We ran a mentorship program in Uganda. If you want to make a difference in somebody's life, all you got to do is be willing to show up for them. And you, for me, I don't know what context that's going to look like. I'm playing around as a consultant. I'm working with a paper and packaging company, and I just love the opportunity that's in front of me. And never in a million years would have I said that's what I'm going to go and do, or that's what I want to do in this season of my life. But I'm very much trusting God that this is where He has me for some reason that I haven't seen yet. If you let me dream big, I would love to buy containers, like not the full size containers, but the little shorter ones, and package those things up with balls and equipment, and pick some villages and um, schools in Uganda that we could go and partner with and create a little sports facility in a box and
Mhm.
deliver that and really help these kids that are getting a decent education better than they've ever gotten before, and give them the sports side of it and see if we could get some of those kids into college. Can we get them in track and field? Can we get them in soccer? Can we open up an opportunity to get these kids an education that they would have never gotten before? And so that would probably be my big, holy, audacious dream.
Yeah. When we do our vision casting, we talk about blue sky thinking. Let's just take away those obstacles. I know it's business speak, isn't it? But I think it's helpful to say what would that look like, and to dream. big, you know, and if as
Yeah.
Christians, I don't think that's an issue. We want to see your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's a big mission statement. You know, Luke chapter 4, and he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to preach good news to poor. And it goes on to say, set captives free, see the blind see, you know, the lame walk, all of those things, you know, those are
Mm,
big, audacious goals. The cross was a big, audacious goal, you know, to bring redemption to the whole of humanity. So definitely, I'm with you on that one as someone who wants to pioneer and break new ground and see God do things in this generation that we couldn't have seen possible. Yeah, we wouldn't have imagined possible, and yet He chooses to work with us in that. So yeah, I'm excited for the dream and to see what God does continue it for your life in California, but also this divine connection back to Uganda and maybe other parts of Africa in the future. But I understand the soft spot for the pearl of Africa.
absolutely. As Churchill called it. And there's two other pieces. I love surf ministry now. As you mentioned, I've gotten into surfing the last few years, and the way that you can build a relationship sitting in the water with someone is almost identical to how you build it playing soccer on the field with someone. And what I saw as we were leaving Uganda and heading back here, we went up to the refugee camp. So there's a lot of South Sudanese coming. I don't know if they're still coming, but at that time, I mean, it was hundreds of thousands of people week in and week out coming down from South Sudan. And I know there's still atrocities happening there today. But how can we support those refugee camps? Can we bring joy? Can we use sport? How can I even potentially, hopefully, one day partner with the message in Uganda to bring something up to that northern region and those South Sudanese? There's been groups of them that have been there for over 25 years from the original civil war that was happening. And so it's certainly an area where God has showed me a compassion that I didn't know that I had, and it has not left me. And so there's a lot of little dreams and pieces that I just threw out there, but I'm hoping that the Lord will give me the opportunity to serve Him and serve those populations in that way.
I think one thing that's coming through strongly in this series of podcasts is this essential ingredient of relationships, and how relationships are so critical. That often what is lacked in someone's life, they may be in poverty, they may be in spiritual poverty, they may be just in a difficult circumstance, and often what is lacking in their life is not the money or the materials or even the qualifications or the skills. It's actually a relationship
Hmm.
that be that catalyst to bringing about new opportunities, new hope, new ideas, new thoughts, just new ways of doing things. We all need that. We all need those kind of relationships, don't we? We spur one another on towards love and good deeds through those relational interactions and friendships and mentoring and all those ingredients that you said. And when we're in that, how much richer we become as believers. And then if resource does flow, you mentioned this as well, then you've got trust. Trust is established. That's so important in mission and ministry and cross-cultural work is there has to be that foundation of trust. But trust does take time. It does need to be tested. But at the
Hmm.
same time, as Christians, we should be seeking that. It should be something that we are wanting to, because through trust, then we can genuinely empower. And Jake, I think that strikes me about your heart is you do want to empower. You want to see other people thrive, and that's such a valuable asset to who you are, and we
Yeah.
appreciate you. I appreciate you for that, Jake. We're going to wrap this up. But any final thoughts that you might have around the things we've been talking about, be that mission, be that leadership, be that traversing the ministry space and the business space. So we're looking for a Jake Pearl of wisdom to finish the episode.
Yeah, I love that. A little story, and you even mentioned having the material things. And I see so many people here in Southern California that have all the material things you could ever want and you could ever ask for, and there's no joy. And the people that we were with in Uganda and South Africa and even around here in some circumstances, It isn't at all about the material. It really isn't. There was I was raising money for 24 for 24. I made a commitment. I was really excited about trying to raise, $4,000. And so I'm calling everybody. I'm muscling it. I'm working the lines. I'm really trying to get there. I'm like a couple $100 away. I'm like, Mom, I need another donation. Like, let's make this happen. And I connect with this guy, and I go and I meet with him, and he says, "Come back, I wanna write you a check." And he wrote me a check, and I didn't look at it right away. I jumped back in the car, and he wrote a check for $5,000. That to me was like the Jesus feeding the 5,000. I mean, that was the picture in my mind of if we wanna do it ourselves, yeah, we can gut $4,000 out, and we can hit our goal, and we can be really proud of it. But the moment that we give it to Jesus, it isn't about anything else, and he's gonna show up, and he's gonna feed everybody, and he knows every hair on our head, and he's gonna take care of us like he always has.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Brilliant, Jake. Jake, thanks so much for joining us. It's been great to have you here on the Follow Forward podcast again. You've shared a real story. We're listening to a global voice of Christ centered servant leadership. This podcast is going to bring more inspiring stories to bring hope, to flip the switch, to change the narrative of what God is doing through leaders around the world as we follow the example of Jesus Christ. So please stay tuned for more episodes of Follow Forward. And Jake, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you for listening to the Follow Forward podcast. This may have been my idea, but I worked with an awesome team to make it come to life. Thank you to Lucy for guest management, scheduling, and being a real gap filler. Jordan for taking over the guest management baton, as well as doing content production, scripting assistance, and editing of these podcasts. Alistair and my lovely wife, Christina, for technical production, and Taryn for taking behind-the-scenes content and crew support. Whether you're watching or listening, make sure to hit that subscribe button on whichever platform you are on, and share this episode with your friends so we can inspire even more people together. We release a new episode every Thursday, along with extra content to help you grow as a leader of people and a follower of Christ. Follow my Facebook page at Dr. Tim Tucker to access all the bonus content. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to send a DM or leave a comment letting us know what you enjoyed about the episode. God bless, and we'll see you next week.